Real Madrid have made some signings over the years that have raised eyebrows. More often than not, the surprise derives from a place of, wow, how will this talented player add to their already strong squad? Other times, it's the fee that has shocked people. But back during Real Madrid's Galácticos era, a certain signing in January of 2005 caught people by surprise, and with what followed, he surprised his teammates in training as well, even knocking out the tooth of none other than Ronaldo, R9. Real unveiled Thomas Gravesen on January 14, 2005. The Danish midfielder that had garnered an interesting reputation off of the pitch, but was also highly respected on it after 4.5 years of Premier League football with Everton. Speaking of which, keen eyes, including those of his former teammates who were watching, may have noticed that Gravesen showed up to his Real Madrid unveiling wearing his Everton suit, which was very on brand for him. Despite signing for the biggest club in the world and joining the likes of Ronaldo, Figo, Zidane, Beckham, Raul, etc., he didn't bother getting a new suit for the occasion. When his former midfield partner and bald brother at Everton, Lee Carsley, brought it up on the phone shortly after with him, Gravesen replied with, quote, "I had to represent the club, lad." That was his character, and what made Gravesen unique. A talented midfielder, but an odd duck, as we will go over firework fights in training grounds, fist fights with a Real teammate, and a private but off-kilter post-retirement career that shocked nobody due to the bizarre antics of his time in football. I'm Adrian, by the way. Thanks for joining me, and if you like videos like this on somewhat forgotten football figures, then subscribe for more here from Rabona TV. Thomas Gravesen started his professional career with his hometown club Weiler Boldklub in 1995 before moving to Bundesliga side Hamburger SV. Hamburg, the club that feels like they will never return to the Bundesliga at the moment. Spare a thought for good Fiago.
I could literally cry, man. We lost the derby 3-0 now. We lost this game 4-0.
Anyway, after 3 successful seasons at Hamburg as a defensive midfielder, Gravesen would continue his career by signing with Everton in 2000, a club that was struggling to crack the top 10 of the Premier League for many years now. Their 6th place finish in the 95-96 season felt like a lifetime ago at that point. Gravesen joined Everton in the same summer as Duncan Ferguson and Gary Naismith. As for the Dane, he would go on to be known as the Mad Dog, which kind of tells you everything about his play style. Take no prisoners, hard in the tackle, relentless and aggressive. That was without the ball. But with the ball, he could be surprisingly elegant at times, and at the very least, hard to get off of it. As his former manager David Moyes said of him, quote, "Tommy was mental in a good way. He was a great player. He'd hold you off. He could keep the ball off you, and we loved him." His bald-headed brother in Everton's midfield, Carsley, said the same, saying, quote, "Thomas had flair and skill. He ran with the ball and could draw a foul. A great player. I've played with some great players, but whenever I'm asked about the best, Thomas was so underrated, but so appreciated by the lads he played with. He was a great guy as well." Gravesen was a solid defensive midfielder and had everything most managers would want on the pitch: tenacity, strength, and composure. He was beloved by his teammates. His managers said that he fully understood Everton, and that he was one of the most likable members of the squad, even with the madness that came with him. He was seen as a peculiar character, someone who just acted like a local kid. With his newfound wealth in the Premier League, he purchased Porsches and BMWs, only to show up for preseason one year in a green Nissan Micra, which he loved more than anything. Gone were the supercars, in came the practicality. He also endeared himself to his teammates and supporters via, well, his accent. Gravesen's accent when he speaks English is a bizarre mix of Danish and Scouse, with him frequently using local Liverpool dialect as well.
There was like 25 players, but all of us were mates.
However, the madness took over at times with Gravesen. You know, those intrusive thoughts that you get and you ignore? Gravesen didn't ignore them. One story in particular from his Everton days speaks to this madness. At Everton's former Belfield training complex, there was a massive open gymnasium area where players would do small-sided training indoors, work with the physios, etc. One day, Gravesen ran into the room and started firing fireworks at the physios, teammates. It was open season, man. Everyone was getting some. However, he found a worthy adversary in a young Wayne Rooney, who returned fire during the Battle of Belfield. David Moyes, speaking to Open Goal, recounts the historic conflict.
And big rockets, big, kind of about that thick and that long, full of gunpowder. And they were holding one end and shooting them at each other.
I've linked to the full video below if you want to check it out. Please do support the people who made it. That wasn't the only time, however. Gravesen was a known rocketeer, setting off fireworks on a few separate occasions, shooting them outside, in through windows, in the gymnasium, you name it. And the poor physio, he got a rocket shot at him by Gravesen while he was running with the injured players as well, according to multiple teammates. With Gravesen around, nobody was safe, friend or foe. On the pitch, Everton's midfield, however, for the most part, was quite safe, as Gravesen played with Everton at a time where they started to turn the tide, find some form. Thanks to smart signings and the emergence of David Moyes as a perfect fit for the club in 2002, year upon year, Everton would improve, then have a setback, only to climb higher in the following season. In the 2004-2005 season, Everton would climb as high as 4th place, even finishing above Liverpool. Mind you, Liverpool did win the Champions League, so maybe it was a coincidence, or maybe it was a testament of what they had lost in the midfield, but upon Gravesen's departure during the 2005 January window, Everton's form would fall off greatly in the latter half of the season without the Dane in their midfield. Prior to his move to the Spanish Giants, Gravesen was playing some of his best football for both club and country, and was starting to get some major attention internationally. Given Gravesen's Everton contract was due to run out in June of 2005, and without any renewal signed as of yet, the soon-to-be 29-year-old was seen as a potential coup for anyone who secured his signature. He was by no means the star of the Premier League, but he was a respected player all the same. According to Gravesen and his best friend from Everton, Carsley, his bald brother, as I've said a few times, there were two major sides who had approached him in January of 2005, wanting to sign him immediately: AC Milan and Real Madrid. Both clubs had won the Champions League recently. Both clubs are titanic when it comes to European pedigree, and both wanted Gravesen. Not bad clubs to be associated with, eh? In fact, Gravesen was surprised by Los Blancos' interest. As he told 442 magazine back in the day, he received a call from his agent while he was watching a movie at the theater with his brother. On that phone call, he assumed that his agent was asking him what he thought about Atletico Madrid, to which he responded that he was happy with Everton. But when his agent clarified it was Real Madrid, Gravesen paved the way to make the move happen. Real Madrid had been without a proper defensive midfielder since Claude Makelele had left the club for Chelsea just over a year prior. This was seen as a position that new manager Wanderlei Luxemburgo needed to be filled ASAP in order to get Real Madrid back into the title race. Luxemburgo requested that club director Emilio Butragueno and newly appointed director of football, the legendary Arrigo Sacchi, make that position a priority for the January window. It's funny because of how things were ended with Gravesen at Real, which we'll get there soon. When people at Real Madrid are asked of who was responsible for the signing of Thomas Gravesen, they kind of pass the buck in a, oh, I don't know, but it wasn't me kind of way. Former president Ramon Calderon, who was only a director at the time, speaks of Gravesen as if he is a nobody, barely remembering where he played prior to signing with Real Madrid, before saying something along the lines of, well, it must have been the director of football who signed him, aka Sacchi. But anyway, confusing whodunit football signing aside, upon arriving at the club in his Everton suit for just 3.4 million euros, Gravesen in Real Madrid's iconic white strip was a peculiar sight, not just because he was a peculiar dude, but because this was still the Galáctico era at Real Madrid. Years prior, the likes of Figo, Zidane, Ronaldo, and David Beckham had joined the club. They'd be on their way out soon, but still.
Roberto Carlos was changing next to me, and the other side was Zinedine Zidane, so I was like, all right, I'm right here where I belong.
The juxtaposition of a guy who traded in his supercars for a Nissan Micra, who fired rockets at his teammates and was generally seen as a madman, now suddenly training alongside and taking to the pitch next to these international icons of the game at one of the most historic and recognizable clubs in the world. I mean, it was bizarre to say the least. In fact, on the pitch, things started fairly well for Gravesen, as he managed to play his way into the starting 11 almost immediately, at times at the expense of Beckham and at times at the expense of Guti. In fact, Gravesen even managed to score a goal in a victory against Espanyol, which made for 6 consecutive wins under Luxemburgo as Real started to surge toward leaders Barcelona. It was clear that Gravesen was brought in to really toughen up Real's midfield, as the aforementioned players didn't exactly have that same sort of steel that the Mad Dog Gravesen had. However, there were some that thought that while he did bring more aggression to the midfield, and this should come as a shock to nobody, they also thought he looked out of place next to the elegance of Zidane, Beckham, Guti, etc. Despite a strong start to his Real Madrid career, however, Gravesen would lose his place under Vanderlei Luxemburgo. Meanwhile, with Real Madrid failing to win the league by 4 points and having form that was patchy at best to start the next season, Luxemburgo was sacked in early December of 2005, and caretaker manager Juan Lopez Caro would reinstate Gravesen as of January of 2006. In fact, one of Real Madrid's best patches of form during that season was when Gravesen was played in the midfield, winning 5 consecutive matches with the Mad Dog on the pitch. A little too mad, however, as he got himself suspended for collecting 5 yellows as well. With Real Madrid losing out to Barcelona once again in La Liga, and having not won since 2003, they looked to legendary Italian manager Fabio Capello for what was his second stint with the club. But Capello annoyed the Real Madrid board due to his choices of not playing Ronaldo or Beckham as often as they would like, and only lasted 1 season. Anyway, he also annoyed Thomas Gravesen, of which the Dane said that Capello was dismissive of him and told him he didn't need him immediately. Speaking of Gravesen, Fabio Capello went on record saying, quote, "The way he is, we won't have problems with him. He's just a little bit peculiar. I don't mess with him. He works well tactically. His behavior is like this, and I don't like it. Everything has to be done like he wants it to be done." A bit all over the place, but that "I don't mess with him" certainly seems like he's a bit scared of Gravesen. One player who definitely was scared of him was Robinho, of whom Gravesen got into a fight with during a heated training session. As Gravesen explains it, he went in hard but fair on Robinho twice, after which Robinho swung at Gravesen. Not one to back down, the Mad Dog swung right back and had to be held back by a few of his teammates. This wasn't the first time he clashed with the Brazilian attacker at Real, but at least with the first one, it was playful. Gravesen, the madman, was throwing around none other than Ronaldo Fenomeno during a training session. I mean, see for yourself, the strength. While he was play fighting with the Brazilian striker, Gravesen claims that R9 lost a tooth during their wrestling match. And the management didn't seem to appreciate the Danish midfielder. And with Capello bringing in his former Juve defensive midfielder Emerson, Gravesen was sold to Celtic just weeks after his clash with Robinho. At Celtic, he would spend 1 season there, go on loan to Everton, but his Celtic teammates had more wild stories about the Dane. Apparently, he was an incredible pool player that would hustle everyone for their money. Apparently, he spent summer holidays in a tiny room in his parents' attic in Denmark, this despite being a millionaire, where he climbed the ranks of Call of Duty, allegedly making it to #1 in the world at one point, according to his former teammate, Paul Caddis. His post-career life is one of mystery as well. It won't surprise you to hear that upon retiring, given Gravesen invested his Real Madrid salary well, he moved to Las Vegas and began playing at high-roller poker tables, losing millions but winning even more in the process, and played neighbor to Andre Agassi and Nicolas Cage in a glitzy Vegas community. Recently though, Gravesen has moved back to Denmark as of 2018, continues to invest his money through his holding company, and works from time to time as a football pundit as well. All things considered, given the character he was as a professional, his post-career moves aren't very surprising, are they? He was a unique individual, and his signing with Real Madrid will always be seen as unique as well. Uniquely out of place perhaps, but interesting all the same. That, in essence, is Thomas Gravesen. That's all for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed this quick look at Thomas Gravesen's time with Real Madrid, and some context was needed as well, hence the focus on his time with Everton also. If you enjoyed this video, then do me a favor and drop a like to let the algorithm know how you felt about it. But beyond that, I thank you so much for watching this, and I hope to see you in another video. Ciao.